We are back with Team Rising. We've got Kristen and Inez today. So an op-ed in the New York Times really caught my eye, and it was reviewing some new political science over this sort of sense of nihilism within the American public. And in particular, they asked a few questions and asked people if they agreed with them. And they found that 40% of Americans, when they think about their political and social institutions, cannot help thinking, just let them all burn. And also 40% believe we cannot fix the problems in our social institutions. We need to tear them down and start over. I think fair to say Sagar and I both probably agree with those sentiments.
Yeah.
But Inez, what does this say about the state of, America and the public and how we're feeling about our politics?
So it's interesting because this article doesn't just cite more recent polls, it cites Pew polls going back, and nearly every American institution, social, governmental, is underwater, meaning under 50% trust or approval rating, right? The one exception is the U.S. military. Yeah. That's the only institution that a majority of Americans still trust. But where I part ways, I think, with this New York Times article is that it seems to frame this as like a problem that came out of nowhere, as though those institutions had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that trust in them is dropping. I mean, take the media. 9 out of 10 Republicans say they don't trust the media, but so do 3 out of 4 independents. So do 2 out of 3 moderates, right? And they point to inaccuracies and fake news as part of the problem. And look, we just had this story this week in Bloomberg reporting, not some random, not InfoWars, not some random thing, where somebody lost their job in the Trump administration over fake news.
They were reinstated, right? It was disgraceful. And I think the real thing is, Kristen, what we're getting at here is, 40% of the electorate now does not, or so 40% of the American people do not support these social and political institutions. Now, why does it make sense for some of these candidates, especially like Joe Biden, to double down on these institutions going into the 2020 election? That is how Donald Trump won the presidency.
I think that you're talking about different. I don't think you can talk about the Republican Party the same way as you can talk about the Democratic Party. Not better or worse, but just institutionally what Donald Trump has kind of done in the last couple of years with the Republican Party, and where those folks have moved. But it's no wonder that 40% of people want to tear everything down. This isn't a last 2 years problem. We go. As a House person, right, we go to the mats every 2 years, tearing down our political opponents, even if they're friends behind the scenes. The members talk about that a lot when they're on the floor, what they have to do to each other in order to get elected. So it's no wonder that the people think that, nobody's getting along and that it's all, this negative.
And the influence of money, which goes back to the conversation we were having in the previous panel. This is something that motivated, I think, both Sagar and I to get into politics, right? The corruption that is so endemic. The fact that if you want to understand why something is happening in this town or around the country, just follow the money. And as you brought up the media, part of the problem with the media is the profit motive, that it's about infotainment and titillating viewers and readers rather than serving the public interest. That's another piece of this, that corruption has so eroded people's trust in what's going on here that they're willing to throw a Donald Trump bomb at the system, that they respond to, Bernie gets knocked for being too angry, but people are freaking angry.
I think maybe the source of the corruption, both sides see incredibly differently, right? Yes. So I would argue that it's not the profit motive in the news industry that's caused them to do so many false stories, to report on so many false stories that they then have to retract. That's not the profit motive. That might have something to do with sort of sensationalized headlines or some other things. But
why did they fixate on Trump in 2016? Why did they show? Because of ratings. They showed his empty podium rather than, a more substantive speech that was ongoing because of the ratings. That's the profit motive.
Fundamentally not where Americans are reporting they mistrust the media. That if you dig into, for example, the survey on the media, this is Pew and Gallup, I think. There are 2 major surveys that go on long term. The top 2 issues are bias and fake news. Right? Those are the top 2 issues. I think sensationalized headlines came in number 10 or something like that. So people nobody really, we all like clickbait, but we don't deeply like clickbait. We understand that it's sort of a problem the way we sensationalize the news, but that's not people's top problem.
I honestly don't think it's an either-or thing,
why they don't trust the media.
I actually agree with you. I think, Kristen, the media tends to come from sort of affluent liberal circles, and they tend to reflect the taste of affluent white liberals. So that explains both, that they didn't get and didn't predict what was going on with Donald Trump and the energy among the white working class for him, and also why they have contempt for Bernie Sanders, who has a multiracial working class coalition, because they don't know those people. They're not in their circles. It's not like they're intentionally trying to do this, but it's just a complete blind spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea, though, that maybe the traditional, media comes from the more affluent left circles, but there is a major news machine, media machine that is operated by operatives on the right.
Sure.
I mean, and you're not just looking at Fox, you're looking at, and there's coordination, there's all kinds of stuff, and you can see it. I can see it as a communications professional
funny
here.
Somebody who
the way things get injected into the conservative
the way things get injected in a very in a very transactional way. In a very transactional way.
As somebody who came out with the idea that we are in any way equal to what the mainstream media has is
looking at each other
the two people who worked in conservative media here are like, oh boy.
But how you're able to get things out into the bloodstream, and I do not mean this as a criticism. I'm talking about.
We're envious.
There is a democratization of media. I think you're right to the extent that we no longer have these 3 cable channels that are completely controlled by, but we do have a plethora of media on the left and the right. That is going to mean that there are fewer gatekeepers. It does mean that there are going to be, more mistake stories. There's going to be more chaos in the media. But that democratization, I think, ultimately is a good thing.
I think so too.
But I also think it's a crucial antidote to the mistrust that people have in media.
Yeah.
I think the answer is more and not less.
The democratization is a result of what we're seeing here.
Yeah,
it's a total lack of trust in the institutions. And the institutions have no grappling with their role in bringing about the system. They're doubling down and tripling down in certain respects. And you see that in a lot of the primary and in a lot of the giving that are going towards the candidates. I mean, you have the Joe Biden who is telling a room full of Wall Street billionaires, nothing will fundamentally change under my watch. That is kind of the nightmare scenario for people who don't trust these institutions and the kind of the havoc that they have wreaked, and I think that's why they're willing to burn it all down.
I think anyone who is not responding in some way to this sentiment is doomed to fail. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't possibly get elected, but if a Biden were to get elected and not respond to this fundamental sentiment of distrust, of anger, of fear, of all of that, his administration will not be successful.
Couldn't agree more. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. You guys are both great. Next on Rising, after hours of climate town halls yesterday, what did we really learn about the 2020 candidates' climate proposals?
Climate scientist Michael Mann, he shares his takes on the ideas and why the DNC won't hold an official climate change debate when Rising returns.